They have a lot of evidence against them. Thus, the answer is no. Basically, you may just pick a prison as you travel through it. Would everyone like to go somewhere? 1090. Jake was not lying. Theo's murderers were just given harsh punishment. And then the strange thing. The judge allegedly lessened the punishment, and one of them leaped over the bench and attacked him. Simply put, the case went haywire. The future is bleak for the murderers. The death penalty might be brought back. Again, according to certain rumors. Now, let's get started. The assault in the courtroom and the murder. In the courtroom, there was total chaos. Screams, threats, and the sound of a fist clanging against wood paneling. Just minutes after the Foolio murderers were sentenced to life. In prison, Rashad Murphy, the man who allegedly claimed that he had finally sated his thirst for vengeance, came at the presiding judge with a sharp piece of plexiglass. To understand why this happened, you must understand the whole identity of Foolio and the reasons behind the gap his death made in Florida rap culture. Originally named Charles Jones, Julio Foolio did more than just rap about death. As a mark of honor, he branded it and wore it. He battled his way out of tragedy and poverty on the north side of Jacksonville. The shooting death of Foolio's own father occurred when he was only a teenager. His neighborhood was shattered by waves of gunfire, and he saw people dying.
I was like 15, 16.
What happened with that?
Well, he was in the neighborhood we used to be on called Clyde, and he ended up getting killed.
Someone once told a moving story about how a rival tried to have him executed in public. The shooting had fractured his hip, and his body was limping. On the sidewalk, begging for help. A terror did not, however, deter him. He doubled down because of it. For in Foolio's world, if you didn't pretend to be the most lethal man present, you were already dead. This led him to keep rapping. He went on to list individuals. By recording music videos in graveyards, he ridiculed the families of men who died in the same cycle of violence he was involved in. When the hit song Who I Smoke was published, Foolio stood his own and took a witty shot at his best friend's grave. He retaliated by devising fresh antics, threats, and explanations for his dismissal. Next, at last, someone did it on June 23, 2023. Throughout Tampa, they followed Foolio as he celebrated his birthday at various clubs. Alicia Andrews, the pregnant woman who was ultimately found guilty along with her co-defendants, was one of the lookouts, according to the state. She used their phones to follow Theo everywhere, as did another man, Isaiah Chance. When the three shooters arrived, there was nothing but gunfire and no prior notice. The murder of Theo was the result of a years-long revenge plot. The initial startling finding came during a court-appointed psychiatrist's examination of the inmates in the weeks before sentencing. Murphy was placed under covert suicide watch. They had found a homemade noose and a handwritten Bible passage about retribution in his cell. He also allegedly told another inmate that he would sooner die than watch that judge mock him. According to investigators,
they said he was suicidal and he started talking about he wanted to bring a Bible with him or something. These are all signs that things are going to go very bad for them.
Witnesses said that in the seconds after the final phrase was read, Murphy's entire mood altered. Without a word, he ran for the bench with plexiglass in hand, ready to cut the judge's neck. His face went blank. He was wrestled to the ground by security in front of a bewildered family, many of whom had only begun to feel the slightest bit of closure. But it was an illusion of closure. Because this courtroom breakdown was never only caused by the rage of one man. Untreated pain, viral celebrity, and a street culture that sees retribution as a form of profit came together to create an inevitable situation. Consequently, Jacksonville locals are now stating, "This is far from over." Consider this if you think this is a singular case of madness. During the process of removing Murphy and his co-defendants from the holding area, investigators found a number of handwritten messages. One of them was an ominous vow. If we are broken by this system, we will break them back. A manifesto, a warning, or a glimpse of the violence that might break out next. The twist is nearly too unbelievable to be real. According to the prosecution, in the weeks leading up to the verdict, the entire group organized coded communications to the outside world, threatening witnesses and instructing affiliates to appear in court to frighten the victim's family. One line in one of these messages, according to sealed documents, said that prosecutors considered a direct threat. They hope that we will fold. Let us first make them fold. There is no security in the court. Think for a second about that. In order to overshadow any notion of accountability, they plan to turn the punishment into a violent show. For those who have been following Jacksonville, rap, none of this should be shocking. Funeral homes are now used as disc video backdrops thanks to the same environment. The same scene that treated dead competitors like social media trophies. Foolio knew that these people hated him, but he had no idea that the hatred would follow him for a long time. Death into the hands of affiliates and sympathizers. Into courtrooms. Into the certainty that the slaughter would never end. According to reports, Alicia Andrews, the young woman now known as the pregnant lookout, came down with detectives and acknowledged being present at the incident just hours after her arrest. She tried, however, to claim that she was just at the wrong place at the wrong moment. The appeal for pity was made in spite of the fact that the evidence was overwhelming any reasonable doubt. I know that sounds contradictory, but it is. But the entire story is predicated on contradictions. Because, while outwardly begging for forgiveness, she and the others were covertly discussing retaliation. However, in mugshots, they were grinning and pledging to make amends while their attorneys painted them as naive kids. This duality, the inner thrill of retribution coupled with the performance of regret, was what set up the courtroom attack. Speaking on condition of anonymity, a former investigator described it as the most conscious act of contempt for the court he had ever seen. You could sense it the moment they walked in, as though they were actors in a play they had rehearsed 100 times. The only thing to wonder was which of them would snap first. They then took a picture. Murphy leaped across the table, but it wasn't just an outburst. A declaration was made. It is not that we respect your laws. We don't fear your prisons, and we shall infuriate you, even if it means dying. But this is the topic that almost no one has discussed. The more significant breakdown that enabled it all. Considering that the prosecutors did not simply ignore the warning signs, an entire ecology was involved. To gain views and conversation, music promoters, YouTube channels, and bloggers promoted violence. Living conditions in Foolio were appalling, and Jacksonville was never a pleasant place to call home. That place was never safe.
Okay, when you say it's the worst hood, what does that mean exactly?
Like killing, shootings, prostitution, drugs, like whatever, like anything you don't supposed to see, you gonna see it up.
Said that in the seconds after the final phrase was read, Murphy's entire mood altered. Without a word, he ran for the bench with plexiglass in hand, ready to cut the judge's neck. His face went blank. He was wrestled to the ground by security in front of a bewildered family, many of whom had only begun to feel the slightest bit of closure. But it was an illusion of closure, because this courtroom breakdown was never only caused by the rage of one man, untreated pain, viral celebrity, and a street culture that sees retribution as a form of profit came together to create an inevitable situation. Consequently, Jacksonville locals are now stating, this is far from over. Consider this if you think this is a singular case of madness. During the process of removing Murphy and his co-defendants from the holding area, investigators found a number of handwritten messages. One of them was an ominous vow. If we are broken by this system, we will break them back. A manifesto, a warning, or a glimpse of the violence that might break out next. The twist is nearly too unbelievable to be real. According to the prosecution, in the weeks leading up to the verdict, the entire group organized coded communications to the outside world, threatening witnesses and instructing affiliates to appear in court to frighten the victim's family. One line in one of these messages, according to sealed documents, said that prosecutors considered a direct threat. They hope that we will fold. Let us first make them fold. There is no security in the court. Think for a second about that. In order to overshadow any notion of accountability, they plan to turn the punishment into a violent show.
For those who have been following Jacksonville,
Rap, none of this should be shocking. Funeral homes are now used as disc video backdrops thanks to the same environment. The same scene that treated dead competitors like social media trophies. Foolio knew that these people hated him, but he had no idea that the hatred would follow him for a long time. Death. Into the hands of affiliates and sympathizers, into courtrooms, into the certainty that the slaughter would never end. According to reports, Alicia Andrews, the young woman now known as the pregnant lookout, came down with detectives and acknowledged being present at the incident just hours after her arrest. She tried, however, to claim that she was just at the wrong place at the wrong moment. The appeal for pity was made in spite of the fact that the evidence was overwhelming any reasonable doubt. I know that sounds contradictory, but it is. The entire story is predicated on contradictions. Because, while outwardly begging for forgiveness, she and the others were covertly discussing retaliation. However, in mugshots, they were grinning and pledging to make amends, while their attorneys painted them as naive kids. This duality, the inner thrill of retribution coupled with the performance of regret, was what set up the courtroom attack. Speaking on condition of anonymity, a former investigator described it as the most conscious act of contempt for the court he had ever seen. You could sense it the moment they walked in, as though they were actors in a play they had rehearsed 100 times. The only thing to wonder was which of them would snap first. They then took a picture. Murphy leaped across the table, but it wasn't just an outburst. A declaration was made. It is not that we respect your laws. We don't fear your prisons. And we shall infuriate you, even if it means dying. But this is the topic that almost no one has discussed. The more significant breakdown that enabled it all. Considering that the prosecutors did not simply ignore the warning signs, an entire ecology was involved. To gain views and conversation, music promoters, YouTube channels, and bloggers promoted violence. Living conditions in Foolio were appalling, and Jacksonville was never a pleasant place to call home. That place was never safe.
so they knew everywhere she was at. They knew when they were at the B&B. They knew when they got to Tampa. They knew every club they were at. They never mentioned anything about her being at the pop.
The fact that they knew where he was before he did is the worst part. The local media was informed by one homicide detective that this was the case. They knew he was leaving the club. They knew which door he went through. They even knew what car he was going to get into. Considering that while celebrating Foolio's birthday, sharing articles on they were building a kill box around him, surviving everything that was thrown at him, and they had nothing left to lose. But surveillance alone was not enough to seal their doom. Investigators found text messages on the suspects' phones after they were discarded. One was really repulsive. Prosecutors read it aloud during the hearing. After he went, we pulled the curtain. Not if or when. Because to them, this was impossible. Atay promised it. Because of these conversations, the defense never took mistaken identification seriously. As they recorded their own plot in real time, the murderers texted each other, setting up position markers, bragging about how smooth it will be, and giving updates. The question, why did this happen at all, continues to haunt some people. Why would a few young men risk their lives to exact revenge on one pregnant woman?
They have the home surveillance video of one of the shooters where he's packing his car with the guns.
Although it is simple, the answer is ugly. Revenge. In addition to rapping about it, Foolio and his group desecrated and videotaped the grave of Spaz, one of the defendant's brothers, who was shot and killed in Jacksonville. Years before Foolio was shot and killed in Tampa, somebody posted the video online.
If you want to find hand down motive is like, hey, you see your mom crying on the news about someone desecrating your brother's gravesite, and he keeps and a famous rapper keeps rapping about it.
That moment became the myth of the spiral's inception. An experienced journalist covering the Jacksonville scene said that once they got started, there was no going back. That incredible footage was akin to putting off a fuse. And from here, it gets worse. Despite knowing this rationale, the state miscalculated the level of hostility. Several of the videos show Foolio mocking this person. The conviction, they believed, would end it. Instead, it made a fire that was already raging even hotter. Without mentioning Young Jeannes, the other celebrity involved in this dispute, it would be hard to talk about Foolio's death. Ace immediately posted enigmatic messages after Foolio was killed. His recording of himself drinking Don Julio tequila was perceived by many as a final insult. In a city where it's considered respectful to mock your opponent's bodies with such speed, this was regarded as a victory lap. What's so strange, though, is this. During the police raid on the killer's hiding spots on the day they were caught, young Ace was seated in an interrogation room. He was recorded drinking tequila and disregarding questions about the feud. If you wanted proof, here it is. This whole thing was being handled like a reality TV show. There were real lives lost while the cameras were rolling.
Your timing is so crazy. You know what I realized? And I realized this while reading the indictment on stream. The moment Young and Ace was sitting with me for the interview, the cops were raiding the guys. The exact moment.
72 hours prior to the punishment. Everyone believed the violence was over after the trial was over. They were mistaken. Deputies monitoring the defendants in the final 72 hours before sentencing intercepted a series of handwritten letters. They believe it is the end. We're only getting started. Don't let the judge forget he's not untouchable. No one leaves that door if I don't. These notes proved to be the final warning signs of an impending meltdown. But even at that time, no additional precautions were taken, despite evidence of planned threats. When the judge arrived that morning, he was accompanied by as many deputies as at any other hearing. Witnesses vividly describe how little it took to turn the courtroom into a powder bomb. Murphy was holding a sharpened piece of plexiglass and was breathing heavily, almost growling. He froze, and then he lunged as soon. As the judge began reading the sentence, and I thought he would kill him instead of hurt him, take his life. 3 deputies had to wrestle Murphy to the ground, and it took one of them to free the firearm.
The crazy thing about him, he's 18 years old. And it would have meant that he shot Foolio when he was 17.
Since personal resentment isn't the only factor here. Reaction videos went viral on YouTube and Instagram after Foolio's death. Every death celebration, every offensive meme, every rap scene disaster that can be directly linked to this courtroom is the second defendants yelling of obscenities at the families in the gallery, while Alicia Andrews, the pregnant lookout, continued to yell obscenities at the judge when the room was eventually removed. Even after the attack, local authorities were quick to declare that justice had been served. But if you talk to someone who has been through this, you will hear that there is no resolution. They all fueled engagement and traffic with ghoulish speculation. What do you think happens when people find out that you are more famous for making fun of the dead than for your music? They go on and on until someone is killed or a judge is tried to be killed.
police announced they're gonna make arrests. They announced it 4 days after. And then it took almost like damn near a month for them to make the arrest.
No jail sentence will bring Foolio back to his family. No conviction will turn the tide for the killer's families, and no decision will end a decades-long cycle for the city of Jacksonville. In reality, this was never really about a single murder, but rather about a generation that was raised to value violence, taught that respect is the same as retaliation, and was rewarded by an unabated audience. Authorities say that other affiliates are still planning retaliation, so this story is far from over. Many associates are still at large, according to investigators' public statements. And some of them still threaten others via encrypted messaging apps. This isn't finished. And there's no reason to doubt that, given what we've seen so far. The never-ending war. The story may sound familiar to you. A rapper was killed in an old feud. A group of reckless killers was caught and convicted. A contentious court battle attracted national attention. But no headline has ever dared to acknowledge how unsettling the true truths is. Every viral video and mugshot has a web of alliances, betrayals, and the foundation of Jacksonville is meat. The city was bleeding long before young Gina's or Foolio were well known. For many years, Jacksonville was a patchwork of abandoned neighborhoods and housing complexes where underfunded schools and overpoliced neighborhoods came together to foster violence. At its heart was a whole generation that was raised with the idea that their enemies' bodies serve as the foundation for their notoriety and respect. As a result, the rap scene in Jacksonville resembles a live-action horror movie. In the 90s, the locals still remember the summer when the shootings became so frequent that the landlord had bulletproof glass installed in the leasing office. By the time he was 11 years old, Foolio had already seen a woman shot on the steps of his building. And at the age of 15, he shot himself after being ambushed on his way to school by someone who believed he had helped kill their friend. Foolio had been attacked many times before, but this time he did not survive. He never had the chance to become anything other than a product of this environment by any reasonable standard. However, because he not only survived it, but also broadcast it, that is precisely why his story resonated. Foolio's murder felt inevitable. By the time he was killed in Tampa and the system, this is the part that almost no one wants to talk about. The violence escalated over the course of the following year because of the city's hunger for fame, which made him a target for some and a hero for others. Retaliatory neighborhood shootings occurred in Jacksonville. Threats were posted on Instagram stories by anonymous users. Processions for funerals turned violent, and local youths were acting out scenes from the videos and blogs. For example, rappers' street reputations were enhanced for years by police press conferences accusing them of being gang leaders. Courts did little to stop the illegal weapons trade, despite frequently refusing bail for minor offenses. Local prosecutors secured high-profile convictions, but they never really tried to curb violence. Foolio even recalled how the arresting officer told him, "You think you're hard," as he was arrested on gun-related charges. "When you get shot, we'll see how tough you are."
So are you still facing that RICO, or they drop it on you?
Nah,
I mean, meaning drop it, mean did they not charge you with it?
nah, it just went away. Like it's still up to this day though. They told me like, don't get caught with nothing.
Because being ignored is the only thing more dangerous than being shot in a society where using violence is the only way to gain acceptance. He stepped up his efforts after surviving. The murderers kept in touch in the weeks before the sentence, passing handwritten notes to affiliates who attended pre-sentencing hearings and openly questioning whether the pregnant lookout, Alicia Andrews, was aiding the prosecution.
Said Alicia Andrews, who's the girl who's pregnant, she asked for a speedy trial, but the other three waived that. So yeah, I guess that means she's cooperating.
Murphy's jail cell was discovered to have a scrawled message on the back of a commissary form. One of the messages read, "She will be dead on my mother if she snitches." Another was more cryptic. "This is not the end. You are aware of what to do." The defendants arrived prepared for mayhem, and Murphy paced his cell all morning, muttering the same thing. This is my show, according to a deputy's later testimony. When the final sentence was read, it stated, life in prison without parole. He lunged, and 3 deputies tackled him while Alicia Andrews let out a frantic cry. Isaiah Chant stood on the defense table and yelled, "We run this." It was a final act of defiance, more of a spectacle than an attack, and in that moment, everything was clear. If they died, it didn't matter to them. All that mattered to them was that everyone was watching. As the dust settled, the headlines were clear. Convicted murderers attack the judge. Gang members become enraged in court, and a Jacksonville rap feud turns deadly again. But there was something even more terrible going on behind the scenes. A whole generation of kids watched the video and decided that this was what power looked like. And they were already sharing videos of the incident on Snapchat with their own messages. According to local violence prevention campaigners, show respect, he is genuine. The murderer is still in jail months after Fio's death. And the cycle goes on because detectives say the remaining affiliates are still planning violent crimes. According to court documents, one informant heard this terrifying statement, "We won't stop till we reach our goal." No one should question them, regardless of how long it takes, as the same ecology that exalted Foolio's taunting now exalts his. Killer's trial performance. In an interview, Fio said, "I'm not afraid of dying. I just fear dying and being forgotten." He was not forgotten in the end. Nor did those who murdered him.
It probably happen sooner or later. You never know what God got planned, you know? I told him that a couple times, you know? We be talking time to time, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you never know what can happen.
New threats continue to surface almost weekly, months after the horrifying attack. Some are posted anonymously on Telegram. In several of the films, individuals wearing masks read manifestos in parking lots, asserting that this is not the end of it. Several of the witnesses received merely text messages at around 2 in the morning. The prosecutors have confirmed that a second wave of sealed indictments is currently being prepared. Law enforcement also prepares for retaliation behind the scenes when such arrests are made public. Fio's influence goes beyond his compositions. The extent young men will go to make a lasting impression, and the number of lives they will destroy if they feel wronged are both frightening patterns. According to DJ Academics, he thought Foolio was exaggerating when he told him about the previous attacks, but he wasn't.
I remember interviewing Foolio. Man, when he was describing a shootout outside of a studio, he was describing like a movie. Like, to almost the point I'm like, is he hyping it up? I now get to find out he was just a different type of guy.
What exactly did they all win? At this moment, prosecutors are planning more arrests, more indictments, more headlines, and more families who will have to watch strangers examine their grief for clicks and influence. Jacksonville funerals are still a security concern. Children are still being buried by their parents behind lines of armed deputies. People won't wear certain colors in some neighborhoods, and wearing the wrong hat may get you killed. Several schools now hold drill rap sessions, local newspapers reported, since officials are worried that the lyrics could incite violence on college campuses in real life. Additionally, the next diss tune is probably being written tonight. Regardless of the number of life sentences that are handed out, the culture that made this possible still exists. Until that changes, this story will never be completed. Simple solutions do not exist. But there are some questions that are worth asking. Why do we handle tragedy as if it were amusement? What makes people who act disrespectfully worthy of our attention? What makes us indifferent till the bodies are on the ground? Above all, what would it take for us to finally break this cycle? Thus, the next generation has already begun to observe. They're learning that the fastest paths to fame aren't through talent and hustle. It is cruel. The fact that a person may still become a hot topic, a hashtag, or the catalyst for the next viral event is something they are witnessing. That brings an end to this dissection. But don't jump too quickly, because we have a lot more fire in store. For you, now you can tap any of the cards that are on your screen to keep it locked.